So a big problem I see in people's portfolio and when they analyze their current investments is that they are making the wrong mistakes. They're using the wrong metrics when it comes to evaluating their portfolio, because what you did to buy the properties is not what's going to help you go out there and optimize your properties. It all comes down to this one concept, and that is return on equity, or ROE. And when I learned this concept about 5 years ago, I just had one of these massive paradigm shifts. I'm sure you can relate to like a few times out in your life, in personal and career and investing, you've learned the concept and it's just like changed the way you look at everything. And now it's like, oh, there was before this and after this. And once I learned return equity, it changed everything for me in terms of how I was analyzing and optimizing my portfolio. So rather than me explaining what return equity is, let me demonstrate what return equity is. So I'm jumping into my Property Llama account here, and this is a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom condo that one of my clients owned, and we just reviewed her portfolio a couple weeks ago. Now, before I go into numbers, I will give you a little bit of backstory. So like so many landlords, this is a property she used to live in. And then, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, moved out into a new property with her partner, and then turned this one into a rental property. Her goals is she wants a certain amount of income to retire one day. And she is either in the growth or income phase. She is still in the growth phase. So keep that in mind as we come in here and analyze this property. What I do when I start looking at people's properties here is I start here at the return on equity down here. So I dive into this, and let's talk about what a 7% return on equity is. So this number is calculated by essentially taking the 4 ways you make money, so $22,490, and this is taking the current estimate for appreciation gains this year, your debt pay down, your cash flow and depreciation tax benefits, and adding them all up. So about $22,500. You take that number and you divide it by the equity. So $22,500 divided by $320,000 is about a 7% return on equity. Now, before we go into more details, let me ask you this question, and please pause this video and answer this for a second. How do you feel about a 7% return on your money? If you had $320,000 in your checking account right now and you're about to invest it, and I said, hey, you're going to make 7% return on this, what's your feeling? How do you like it, or how don't you like it? Now, what a lot of people come back to is they say, well, I can make that in the stock market. And the stock market is, 8, 9, 10% historically. I'm like, yes. And I think you always want to have some type of comparison on here is, hey, if I invest this in this asset class, how can this perform? So if you're making 7% in real estate versus 7 to 10% in the stock market, again, always make sure you talk to your financial planner. If you're making that money, how does that make you feel? Well, I can tell you personally, if I'm making 7% on my money in real estate, I am not happy with it. Why? Well, because I can make about the same in the stock market. I mean, geez, in this current interest rate environment, some CDs now are paying close to 7%. Because here's something else you have in real estate that you don't have in a lot of other investments. You have tenants and you have real liability. Like your tenant can destroy the place and then cause you to have a $20,000 or $30,000 remodel to go out there and get it re-rented. Your tenants could stop paying rent and you get months and months of, you have to go through the eviction process. Someone could fall and hurt themselves on their property, on your property, and you have a potential lawsuit on your hands. So there is headache and there's also risk with owning real estate, which I'm fine with. I'm happy to take that risk. But if I do, I will make more money than I can make in the stock market or a CD. So this is why a lot of people in real estate, myself included, want to make a healthy double-digit return on their return on equity. So hopefully that makes sense. Again, we have a lot more information on this return on equity concept. I encourage you to really learn this because it's a powerful concept. Like I said, frankly, it changed my whole paradigm. And this was a concept that actually was the first domino that led to all the spreadsheets, led to all the learning that eventually led us to building Property Llama. It is a powerful concept Please understand it. The next thing I look at is loan to value. Now, this loan to value on this property is 0%. That means there's no mortgage. The property is completely paid off. So, I mean, huge congratulations to this investor for having the discipline to pay down this property. And that's what a lot of people are taught to do, is buy a property, pay it down. Here's the issue though. If you remember in our previous video, we talked about, are you in the growth or income phase? If you're in the growth phase, you generally want a higher LTV because that's what gives you a higher return and often leads to a double-digit return on your return on equity. So this is very common. If we see a low return on equity, we often see a paid off property, like a 0% LTV, or a very low LTV, like 30% or less. So if you have a low LTV, not bad, not good, but how is that in relationship to where your goals are at and where your current portfolio is? So the next number I look at is this cash on cash return number. Now, I don't spend much time actually analyzing this for the performance of this property. Again, I like to highlight it because this is one of those metrics. It's a great metric for when you're buying a property or potentially considering a property buy, but it's a very poor metric when you're analyzing the current performance of a property. Why? Well, because this is based off of what money you invested 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And a couple of things happen. You have the time value of money. Money was different 10 years ago. Plus, since then, you've had equity build. And a lot of you out there have refinanced a property or even done a cash out refinance and pulled some money out. So this number gets wonky on here. So I bring it up to say, I personally don't spend too much time looking at this for those reasons. Now, what I spend more time on is the cap rate, or again, the capitalization rate of a property. Now, a cap rate is calculated by taking your NOI, so about $11,000 a year, divided by the current value. So $11,300 divided by $320,000 is about a 3.5%. So this tells you how the rental property is performing if there is no debt on there. So I like this metric because whether you have it paid off or there's a mortgage, it keeps the underlying performance of the property more of an apples to apples. Now, if you have more details on here, definitely dig into it. I'm giving you the high level. Depending on what market you're in, you're gonna have a different market cap rate based on what your market is doing. You know, Los Angeles, California has a different cap rate than Denver, Colorado, than Ohio versus Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. There's no right or wrong, but this you wanna work with your local team and make sure you understand what a good current market cap rate is. Now, my rule of thumb in Denver is if it's below a 4% cap rate, it usually means it's a very, very poor performing rental. Now, the inverse of this is, would I buy a property at a 3.5% cap rate today? No way. That is not a very good rental from just buy a property and rent it out. Very, very poor number. In fact, it'll probably be a negative cash flowing property. So I look at this saying, hey, you've got a great property here that's paid off, but in terms of a rental property, it's no longer a great rental. Again, doesn't mean it's a bad property. It just means it's a poor rental property. And this usually happens when a property has huge equity build or huge appreciation. And this means a lot more people are willing to spend a lot more money to buy it so they can live in it as a starter home. You know, this is for the Denver market. This is a starter home right here for people to get into. So the 3.5% cap rate shows it's not a great performing rental property. All right, so I know that's a lot of information on there. Again, this is why I want you to put your properties in the Property Llama and then sit down with the team and do your one-on-one portfolio analysis session so you can start understanding these numbers. And of course, dive into a lot more education we have on the system here. I want to bring this back to return on equity and all these numbers we talked about, because the numbers tell part of the story, but how does this property fit into this person's portfolio goals for their financial freedom goals? Well, since they need more NOI, they need more future income because they're in the accumulation phase, not the income phase, we can start looking at these numbers and saying, okay, I have a property with lots of equity. The money is not working that hard for me. And again, you have to choose what's right for you in terms of like what type of return you want to see on money you have invested, because all equity is it's money trapped in your real estate piggy bank. Now, I use this metaphor because if it's money in your checking account or money in the stock market, that's very liquid. You can get it within a couple of days, and it's very easy to go sell all your stocks and cash out on there. Now, to pull money out of real estate, it's a lot more difficult. And, you know, I have little kids, and we actually have real piggy banks. We put their pennies and quarters in there. And some of those piggy banks, you basically have to like smash or work really hard to get the money out. Real estate's the same way. We have lots of money, lots of equity in your property, but it takes time and effort and transaction costs to pull that equity out and turn it into something else. And this is where we're going to actually dive into the next video, that fourth step of the portfolio analysis framework, which is the what if scenario. And in that next video, we're going to go through the common what ifs. Hey, what if I keep this property? How does it set me up in my portfolio? Or what if I refinance this property and took money to buy a new property? Or if I sold this property and bought a new property? So again, in the next video, I will go through and walk through this property here for some scenarios on what you can see, what may work and what may not work.